everybody. Hey, don't believe what you're feeling outside. It is spring. It's April 10th, 2019. And
I saw daffodils on my way on my walk
you
in.
did?
Yep.
No kidding.
Yep, already up. Crocuses.
Crocuses. I
It's
always think crocuses.
we're almost there. We're almost there.
Anyway, the sun's staying up nice and late, even when it's cold out. So we are into the spring, no doubt about it. And tonight we have I think a fine guest to join us. She is Amanda Sears, and is your title Executive Director? Director of the Campaign for a Family-Friendly Economy. And they're an advocacy organization that's advocating for some really strong and good policies for us here in New Hampshire, and we're really interested to talk to her. And we'll get into some issues, and we'll get into the history of the organization, talk a little bit about her. We hope she'll talk about herself a little bit. And as always, we hope that we'll have some participation from our viewers out there. And I know you're out there because you tell me, you don't all call, but you do tell me you're watching this show. What's that number? 940-3091.
It's right here, Bob. 640-3091.
640-3091.
They put it in big letters so we don't forget it.
When you get to be a senior citizen, you need that kind of help.
Pshaw.
And Mike, do you have anything preliminary for us?
Nope. I think we're trying to do the new feature. I've been out. I got sick, and so it's been a little bit sketchy. And I'm going to be frank with you. I just got my taxes filed late last night, so I didn't have time to put much together. As far as you're talking,
have you never heard of the extension?
To do the extension, you got to figure it all out anyway. So what's the point?
True. That's true.
If I'm going to go through the pain, I may as well get it done. But I'm happy that's behind me, and I can start thinking a little bit further forward about things. But here's the thing, Bob. The feature that we're working on, that we're trying to do, is called Libsplaining, where we kind of break down some of the liberal ideas that are being circulated these days in politics and are being just ridiculed and made fun of by those on the right, rather than addressing them seriously. So our show today is going to kind of be like an expanded version of that, because we're going to talk about some liberal issues, and we're going to break them down, we're going to explain them. They're not what they say they are on Fox TV. If that's all you watch, you're not getting the full picture. So we're going to round that out a little bit.
So, Amanda, thanks for coming down and joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We're really glad you're here. It's been interesting to try and schedule because you're a busy person, but I would love to have you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you happen to be here and doing the work you're doing.
Sure. Well, and thank you you have asked me a couple of times, and one of the reasons that I'm hard to schedule is because I'm a working mom, and so I have 3 little kids, and so I work all day at my job, and then I rush home for daycare pickups, and Cub Scouts are always Wednesday night, which is the problem that I've always
had. They were Wednesday nights when I was in Den 3 of PAC 118. It was Wednesday night too. You're right.
And my husband's the troop leader, and so it makes it so that I have the other 2 kids when he has my middle child.
We're glad you could work it out to be here tonight.
Yes, so tonight
someone's working
exciting.
double duty, I think.
That's right.
I think we're imposing a little bit.
No, it's wonderful. But that's what's happening for so many families, and so that's actually what the campaign's all about. But I know you wanted me to start by talking a little bit about myself, so
I would like that. Yes.
I'll do that before jumping into these working family issues that we wanted to talk about. So I was born in Laconia, grew up in Deerfield, and that's where I still live now. I actually live next door to my parents, and so I'm raising the 4th generation of my family in our town. I went to Central High, so I'm a graduate of Manchester Schools, and class of 92.
All right.
So familiar with Manchester.
That may be about when one or more of my kids went there. 92, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, I'll have to check. I
have to break out the old yearbooks.
Exactly.
I think so.
I actually pulled one out recently because one of my nephews was going for the 4th grade biography project. He was going as Adam Sandler, and so wanted to bring a Central yearbook. So it was the first time in a long time I had flipped through a Central yearbook. But,
okay.
I have been interested, when I was at Central, actually, I was part of the Students for Social Justice group. Mr. Thomas was one of the teachers that was one of the leaders there.
Will Thomas?
Yes.
That Will Thomas? No kidding.
Yes, and so I actually had the real pleasure. Just a couple weeks ago, we had a rally in the Legislative Office Building, and right in the front was Mr. Thomas, and so I was just delighted and proud to be able to be carrying on work to advance issues, like those that I worked with him in high school on many years ago.
He's never resting. He's on and on and on for doing justice and good for people.
That's right.
Here and abroad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you went to Central, and then what?
Then I went to Clark University in Worcester, Mass, and ended up. Really, I've always worked in my career for the social good in one way or another. So whether it's I co-founded an organization in Maine. I lived in Maine for a while, working for environmental health issues. So when I hear here in New Hampshire now all the issues with PFOS and PFAS, I was working on those kinds of issues in Maine a decade plus ago. So lived in Maine for a while, and then met my husband, who was living in Stratham, and he's a builder. He owns a small construction company, so it was easier for me to move here than for him to move his business. So I moved back to New Hampshire and built a home on our family's land. So came full circle, right back to the same piece of land that I grew up on. So
well, we need more of that
good.
because there's a lot of young people leaving the state, and maybe some of the work that you're doing can help stem that ebb as well.
That's right.
So we know that your job now is Director of Campaign for a Family-Friendly Economy. Tell us about that organization. What's its origins? What's its mission? What's it doing now?
Sure. So the beginnings of the Campaign for a Family-Friendly Economy actually started in the last presidential primary cycle. So as you know, so often New Hampshire gets an influx of folks that have issues that they want to get talked about, and they want them to be introduced on a national stage here in New Hampshire. And so there's often an ebb and flow of resources and attention in New Hampshire for a number of months leading up to the primary. So
like right now.
So you're talking because I'm a little bit unfamiliar. You're talking about not necessarily the candidate teams that are coming in trying to get some traction, but the issue oriented and sometimes very single issue oriented organizations that come in because they know the press is going to be here. They know that the candidates are going to be talking about issues, so they want to bring their issue to the discussion, to one of the debates at St. Anselm's or something like that.
That's right, and it happens a lot. And so ours wasn't an organization, but it was a set of folks who, both funders and others that were interested in raising issues that are important
because they
to
tap
working
into
families.
the local folks to come and knock on the doors and do
That's
everything
right.
else. So you folks were sitting here, joining one group or another group, and that's what gave rise to this.
Right, and that happens quite often. Where the one that's been really popular in the last decade or so is Stamp Out Money in Politics. And so you'll see a rise in attention for folks and groups that want to. We have so much access to presidential candidates here, unlike almost anywhere else. And so there's a real opportunity to have a conversation with candidates that can shape a national conversation on issues. And so the Campaign for a Family-Friendly Economy first really came out of that interest in connecting with candidates early to talk to them about the economy in a way that really matters for families. And so often when we talk about the economy, it's these big concepts that folks who don't have a background in economics don't understand, but we're all influenced by the economy. And it's oftentimes in such individualistic ways, or we think of them as really individualistic. So one of the big issues that, so we work on generally policies that help families to make ends meet and be there for their caregiving needs. And so one, for instance, that we've worked a lot on is childcare and access to affordable quality childcare, which doesn't sound like an economic issue on its face. It sounds like an issue that moms deal with when they're trying to figure out if they can go to work or not.
Yeah, but any mom or dad who's ever dealt with it, it is an enormous economic issue. The issue takes place when families are young and getting started and don't have the kind of income that you get when you're more established. And I have personal experience with changing careers.
That's right.
In order to try to figure out a way that the kids could get taken care of and we could still, continue to bring in income.
That's right.
It is huge to the families that it affects. Maybe not so huge to me right now. I'm a grandfather, but when you're going through it, It's half your annual income. It
That's
can
right.
be. It's extremely expensive.
It's the single largest economic factor. It's the single largest piece of a budget of working families that have young kids. And so if it is, and it is, the single largest part of a family with young kids budget, why aren't we talking about it as part of our economy? And why aren't we looking at a social way to deal with this for young families? Because it is, as you said, you've changed careers over it. People, especially women, who tend to do still have an outsized role in caregiving. A woman who is 25 years old, for instance, who takes 5 years out of the workforce to take care of her child, loses 19% of her income over her lifetime for that 5 years out of the workforce.
I want to clarify something. I think you implied that it was I who changed careers. Unfortunately, no, it wasn't. It was my wife who changed careers and went into childcare in order to be able to care for the kids and still make a little something.
Right, that's quite common.
Left what she was doing before and went, got trained up and went into this career because it was economically necessary.
Right.
So I want to make sure it's clear that,
Right.
and back then, regrettably, the burden was on the mother.
Right.
To address this problem.
And it's not always, but that is often how it shows up. And so sometimes we think of these as women's issues, but are not, because if it's affecting your wife's ability to be a part of the workforce, that's affecting your family's economy. And that's affecting our economy writ large, because if it's holding young families back from being able to be part of our workforce, that's a problem. And it's a problem when we have, for instance, that 25-year-old woman who takes 5 years out for childcare, and if she's losing the 19% of her income over her lifetime, she loses opportunities for advancement in her career. He or she, because oftentimes now we are seeing more and more men do this, but they're losing advancement opportunities for leadership, additions to their Social Security and retirement accounts. So they have a lifelong financial implication for families and caregivers in particular. And so these are social issues, but we often are bearing the brunt of them as individuals and not looking to whether there are solutions that we can help working families.
But the solution,
advance.
we do have commercial daycare. Commercial daycare, I know from what we just discussed, doesn't pay a lot to the people that are providing an extraordinarily important service.
That's right.
Children, it still costs an awful lot for the people who need it.
That's the point. That's the point. You can have a two-income family where the second income is going 100% to daycare, which is why it's very easy to make the decision, look, I'm going to take the time and I'm going to just take care of the kids myself. But then you completely lose a great distance on the career path when you get back onto it.
That's right.
So it's a real dilemma. It's a catch-22 no matter how you do it.
Yeah, there's three faces of the child care real crisis, because there's families can't afford to pay, the workforce can't afford to stay, and child care centers just can't afford to stay open. And so we've actually lost, I forget what the percentage is, it's something like 30% of our child care centers over the last 20 years. And
really?
Yes, and that is because they can't afford to stay open. My child's preschool, which is his daycare right now, is closing at the end of this year, and so that's not an uncommon situation.
It can't survive as a market enterprise. It needs some kind of subsidy because the people doing the work have to be quality people, and they deserve to get more than what they're getting paid. But the owner, the operator, with the best of intentions, by the way, they're much more regulated now than they were, which is not a bad thing. But that operator has to set a price that can make a profit. You're not in business for nothing. And when you do that, you're driving away your customers who then make the choice, look, I'd rather stay home and take care of the kids.
That's right.
So there's got to be some intervention from outside to make this enterprise work.
That's exactly how we see it, is that there are social ramifications for this. And so, when you have a workforce shortage like we have, and we are losing the largest group of people who are out of our workforce who actually want to be and are qualified and ready to be working are caregivers, and particularly mothers. And so there we have businesses going out of business because they just can't find enough people to staff them. When we have that situation, we have a social interest in having our workforce work and having people who want to be in the workforce be able to afford to work. I was actually doing a presentation for legislators at Tandy's, of all places, which is a restaurant in Concord next to the State House. And when I was done, the woman who was waitressing at the bar, she said, this happened exactly to me. I got a $30 raise at my previous job, and that bumped me out of qualifying for the state's child care scholarship program for the subsidy to help low-income working families afford child care. She fell off the cliff, the benefits cliff, where she suddenly didn't qualify for that subsidy anymore. That $30 raise made it so that she ended up having to quit her job because the couple $1,000s that she lost in that subsidy made it so she couldn't afford to go to work. And so she lost a good job that she had worked hard to keep, that she was getting promoted in, because she couldn't afford her raise.
Well, that's a tricky solution to arrive at, though. I mean, you have to have some thresholds. The well is not unlimited.
Right. And so, but maybe making it less of a cliff and more of a gradual drop off for folks, for working families.
Policy solution.
That's right. And then making sure that we're adequately funding that scholarship program. And so that's one thing.
This is New Hampshire, remember.
That's right. That's right. But so there are ways to think about, and because otherwise families like that are often then needing to access other social benefits. So there is a cost to families not being able to afford, to be able to get out the house and go to work. So it's policies like that we're looking at, is looking at these policies that really are the everyday kinds of economics that families are facing, and thinking about how can we make it so that families can thrive in our economy rather than suffer.
So the campaign was founded, you say, about 4 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that. It's always been the campaign for a family-friendly economy.
That's right.
And I mean, how do you make this organization work? I mean, who supports this organization other than you? Who's you're the voice of it, but other than you, I mean, how do you promote your agenda?
Well, we do have a team of folks who are on our staff, and so we have a set of field organizers who work to connect with people in communities across the state to identify folks that are experiencing the need for policies like family medical leave or increases to the minimum wage or child care subsidies. And so our field team gets out and talks to people and identifies those folks, and then helps them to engage in the political process and to understand that there are things that we could be doing differently, and there are policy solutions that are in place in other places that we could put in place here. So that's part of our team. And then we work in coalition with a lot of other groups that exist in the state to raise all of our voices together and connect with others.
Do you have a board of directors, or do you have I assume you're a nonprofit corporation, and
we actually aren't organized as a nonprofit, so we're just a campaign, and we have our nonprofit. There's a nonprofit, the North Main Street Fund, that is the nonprofit that we're sort of organized within.
Okay, well, as Mike told you, this goes by fast. We're already up against our first break.
My goodness.
And we will take a quick break. And once again, folks, I hope some of you will choose to participate with us. We always love to have our callers come in and join us, 640-3091, if you want to participate.
And I bet that
we are talking about real serious issues
stuff
affecting the New Hampshire economy. We have a workforce problem in New Hampshire, and here we have people who want to be part of the workforce that are finding it daunting, if not impossible, to do that because of the constraints they have if they're parents, and if they and maybe not even if they're not parents, if they have can't get a living wage to enter the workforce.
And what are some of the issues that your family's facing? Some of the economic and other policy issues that your family faces living in New Hampshire. We'd like to hear about those. Maybe they'd be
we'd love
good
to,
topic of
we'd love to have some participation here, folks. So please call in if you have a mind to do that, and we'll be very welcoming. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody out there in Progress Report land, which is Manchester. Folks in Auburn,
I like that
believe.
progress report land. I like that. We're claiming it. We're claiming it.
Yeah, we're claiming it after 10 years.
You're our bottom rocker.
We're claiming this. So we had our flag. We're claiming this land, and we are talking with Amanda Sears, the director of the Campaign for a Family-Friendly Economy.
Yeah, talking about progressive issues like helping families thrive, stuff like that.
Helping stuff like that.
Unheard
saving
of.
capitalism from itself. Maybe.
Unheard
I
of.
don't know. But in any event, that's what we've been talking about, and I assume most people have some understanding of the fact that we have a desperate number of people who are trying to be part of this economy, trying to be employees, trying to help New Hampshire move forward, that find it so daunting, particularly if they're parents of young children, with the really severe limitation and cost of daycare, which we need. There was a time. It was when I was a kid, which is a long time ago, Amanda, a long time ago, when mom stayed home and raised the kids, and the dad could go out and make a living wage. My father happened to be a doctor, so he had no trouble making a living wage, and so mom had the luxury of staying home. And I think that's a choice that moms should have. But for many of them, it's not a choice. It's an absolute necessity at the end of the workforce.
Bob, I think the thing is, though, it's a hidden issue because people soldier on. They find a way to get by. They change careers, do whatever it takes to get by, and it's not out on the sidewalk as some of the things that we see here in Manchester. It's not as. I got to think that everybody going through it though feels it, but does the society as a whole understand that we're all in this and we're all struggling together and we could help each other out?
And that we'd be stronger if we address some of these things socially instead of totally as individuals, and which we would. Mm-hmm. And so, for instance, we have $2.3 billion a year in economic cost, which is the cost of unpaid caregiving that New Hampshire families are providing care to family members. And so that's aging family members who need somebody to care for them. That's parents with children with special needs and disabilities. But $2.3 billion is the cost of unpaid care that is being done by New Hampshire families.
And that's being drained out of the pockets of New Hampshire families.
That is largely being borne as, it's largely being experienced as lost wages to working families. And so that is being experienced in households all across New Hampshire. It's holding families back from being able to save for retirement, save for college, spend, afford their health care costs and things like that. And so these are real economic costs, but like you said, people are experiencing them individually. But there are things that we could be doing to help families weather that more effectively and to help our economy at large to succeed. And so family medical leave insurance is one of those kinds of
policies. Let's talk about that. That's a very hot issue in the State House right now. It has been in prior sessions too, but right now it's an extremely hot issue. We have a
liberal vacation policy
liberal vacation policy.
We're talking about.
We have a definite. We're voting on the House budget. I'm sure
That's
tomorrow,
right.
and we have 3 bills to vote on: House Bill 1, House Bill 2, which is the budget, and the trailer, which implements the budget, and the capital budget too. And we want to have this happen. And yet there's a competing so-called voluntary program sponsored by the governor in some sort of an alliance with the governor of Vermont.
We've had a voluntary program for 100 years.
That's right.
How's that worked out?
Right,
That's right.
And,
it's been,
that's
anyone
exactly
could do
right.
it. It's voluntary.
And I guess that is a real big priority for the campaign, right?
It is.
And you want to talk about why that's such a priority and how you think it should best be addressed.
Yeah, I'd love to take a chance to do that. There have been policies in New Hampshire, bills that have come forward in New Hampshire for about 20 years for family medical leave insurance. One of your longtime colleagues in the House, Representative Mary Stewart Guile from Concord.
Yes, let's send out a shirt to her.
Yes.
Mary Stewart Guile, a wonderful lady. We're so sorry she's not back, but she labored on this.
Right.
She was my chairman on the Children and Family Law Committee.
She
She's
really
fantastic.
worked so hard on this, and she deserved a better fate that she got, because her bill passed several times. It kept going into the finance and getting thrown back, and it finally did not happen. But wonderful lady. But go ahead.
Well, yeah,
about
and
that.
so she really moved the ball along over 20 years. And one of the places that she got to was, the legislature kept saying, we need an actuarial analysis. We need some more data. See, what would this actually look like to implement a policy in New Hampshire for family medical leave insurance? So. And there are policies that are in place in other states and that are working and providing sustainable, effective benefits
Not to mention
to working
most of the other
people.
countries in the world.
And almost all of the other
Advanced
countries. That's
yeah.
right. And so, she, worked tirelessly for many years. Ended up that the state, with her support, sort of pushing it, ended up getting a grant from the U.S. Department of Labor several years ago, I think in 2015, to study three things. What did people want in New Hampshire? So what kind of demand is there for family medical leave insurance policies? What do people have now for these benefits? Who lacks access, who has access? And what would it look like and how much would it cost to put together a program for New Hampshire? And so New Hampshire had this research done for our state, for our workforce. And what that found was that 82% of folks in New Hampshire across the board, 82% of Republican women, just across the board, wide support for putting in place a policy that would allow for everybody in New Hampshire who works to have access to temporary partial wage replacement when they need to take time out for caregiving. So this is what we're talking about is just like unemployment insurance and workers' comp. So we realize that when that there's a benefit to making sure that families can maintain their financial security when something unexpected takes them out of the workforce. So we have temporary partial wage replacement when you lose your job through unemployment or when you get hurt on the job for workers' comp. But when you get hurt off the job or you have a family member that needs you to be home and take care of them, people don't have that social safety net. And so the biggest driver of families into poverty is actually a health crisis coming up. And so that's mixed up in all kinds of things, right? It's mixed up in how much health care costs in this country, how much health insurance costs, but it's also mixed up in the fact that people, when they can't go to work, their income stops. And at the time when they need it the most, oftentimes, because they have health costs on top of their regular day-to-day costs. And so this is a common set. We have a model for this already. We have unemployment insurance. We know how to do this. We even know how to do it in this state. We have a Department of Employment Security that knows how to collect insurance premiums, review claims, and process those claims and pay benefits out to people that qualify. So the Department of Employment Security was the recipient of the U.S. Department of Labor grant. The Carsey School of Public Policy at UNH did this study to show that 82% of people support this. 69% of people say they'd be willing to pay $5 a week for access to this benefit. So those kinds of public opinion research was done in New Hampshire. They also looked at who has this kind of benefit available right now and found that 2/3 of the workers in New Hampshire lack access to paid leave to take care of themselves and a family member. And so some people, more people have access to some form of paid leave when they need to take time out for themselves, whether it's sick days or cobbling together. Some places have like a 2-week maternity policy, but so some people have access to care to take care of themselves, but only 1/3 of people have access to paid time they can take to care for themselves or a family member when they need it. And so there's a big lack of access, and there's a disproportionate lack of access with certain workers. So families with incomes under $60,000 a year far and away have the least access. And if you think about that, they're the folks who can afford it least to go without a paycheck. If you are living with under $60,000 in household income, you need every paycheck to pay the rent, and to make your car payment so you can get back to work when you're better.
You do, yeah.
And disproportionately, those lower income workers lack access to paid leave. Disproportionately, women lack access and have more caregiving responsibilities, are more likely to be the people that take time out from work. And other families with caregiving responsibilities, so families with a member in their family that has a disability, disproportionately lack access to paid leave. Part-time and seasonal workers also have very little access. So we have a system of haves and have-nots, and it's really up on its head in terms of the people who need it most having it the least. So that really speaks to everybody deserves to have this benefit. Everybody has access. access to unemployment insurance and workers' comp. If you are working, you are covered by these temporary financial bridges.
Mandatory. You
Right.
can't hire people unless you're willing to
That's right.
participate.
That's right. And so we believe family medical leave insurance should be the same way. And 82%
Imagine if
of
workers'
people
comp was
believe
voluntary.
it too. That's right.
Do you think anyone would carry it?
That's right. They wouldn't.
I mean,
And-
it's an expensive insurance policy.
Right, and it's
I
partly-
believe New Hampshire was the first state to actually have workers' comp.
That I wouldn't know, but it's
And interestingly, New Hampshire, very early on, in 1939, I saw a report done for New Hampshire on temporary disability insurance, which is basically making sure that everybody in New Hampshire would have access to care for themselves if they needed time out. So New Hampshire was one of the first states to look into ensuring that everybody had temporary disability insurance. The report that was done said we should have it, and then, I don't know what happened in the legislature that they didn't end up moving forward with it. But we looked at it very early on, and then have really fallen way behind other places. So
what's the
yes.
what would be the burden on taxpayers? Would that $5 to $10 a week, whatever it turns out being, sustain it as the other workers' comp and unemployment? I mean, they pretty much pay for themselves.
That's right. And so that's what I was, the third piece of research that was done with this U.S. Department of Labor grant was to look at what would it cost for New Hampshire. And so what they looked at was a system that would be built alongside the unemployment insurance program. And they identified that to cover all the workers in New Hampshire that are covered by unemployment insurance, it would be an average of $5 a week to cover everybody. And that would allow for everybody who would be have premiums paid in for them to have access to up to 12 weeks of leave at 60% pay, so that it's enough to help people to try to maintain their financial security, but still giving people an incentive to get back to work, to get back to 100% pay. So that, that's what a lot of economists have found is the sort of a sweet spot, kind of a, you don't want to pay people 100% because they don't have a reason to get back as soon as they can, but it helps people to make their car payment. And so it would be about $5 a week. And the way that the bills that have been before the legislature are set up such that it would be done just like unemployment insurance, where on the first hand, businesses that would be able to opt to offer the benefit themselves, to not even participate at all. They could opt out if they offered the comparable benefit themselves. If they use the state's family leave insurance program to offer the benefit, which most people, we assume, most employers would. Employers would be required to pay in the premiums for that insurance at the same time they do their unemployment insurance quarterly. So it would be an additional line on the form. But then, unlike unemployment insurance, employers would have the flexibility to decide how to pay for it. And so they would be required to remit it, so they could either decide that they are going to offer it as a paid employee benefit, or they're going to pass some or all of the cost on to their employees for the insurance premium.
So they could set that weekly amount.
That's right.
Based on what their employee pool could tolerate, and whether it could be used as a recruiting tool.
That's right. And so some employers might choose to say, we're going to pay for this, insurance premium, and we're going to just take care of it. And some might pass all or some of the cost on to their employees. But like I said, it would be an average of $5 a week to have access to this benefit.
So why is this so hard to get done?
Oh my goodness, it's like feeding a cat medicine.
Huh?
It's like feeding a cat medicine.
I would think so.
What is the
Why is this so hard to get done?
ideological opposition to it? That's it's not a practical opposition. It's ideological because they have to call it names. They have to. They can't address it. They have to.
Well, they're calling it an income tax now.
Well, it's an income tax. So's my car insurance, I suppose.
Right. It's unemployment insurance.
The number one problem we have right now is we don't have the workforce we need. We need more workforce housing. We need workforce development. Here we have these people who want to be part of the workforce, and they're being shut out of it because of the constraints like this.
Right, and this
Just don't
addresses
understand
so
it.
many of our major things that we're grappling with as a state. So, as you said, the workforce. When in states that have this kind of a policy, they have found that women, for instance, in the year following the birth of a child, who have access to this kind of a benefit end up working 17% more hours in that year, which seems counterintuitive because what people always worry about, especially business owners, is if people have this, we're going to lose more workers, we're going to lose more hours, and we need those hours. But in fact, because it increases retention at jobs so dramatically, for instance, that leads to women who are able to take paid time off following the birth of a child end up working 17% more hours because they are more likely to be able to afford to go back to work because they've maintained some financial security, are in a better position to be able to start paying daycare costs
Instead of
and
saying,
get back
I'm
to work.
going to leave my job to have my baby, I'll come back in a year and a half.
Right. And I can't afford, I don't know, I'm in even worse of a state to be able to think about how am I going to afford to pay for child care. I want to be home for the first couple of months. My job's not going to pay for that, so I might as well just, throw up my hands and leave the workforce. And so it's a policy that has been proven to keep people in the workforce. And it's also at the other end of the spectrum. In California, where they've had this kind of a program in place the longest, they've seen that it keeps aging workers in the workforce longer. And I think it's about 2 years longer is what they've seen as an average, which makes a huge impact on a state like this where we have this silver tsunami coming, of our aging population. I think it's here, but it's coming and it's going to be growing and growing.
It's here and it's going to keep being here.
That's right.
It's going to crash on our beach any minute now.
That's right. And so if we can I saw this in my own family where, my dad slipped on the ice when he was shoveling and needed to have knee surgery. And then following that, both he and he actually, ended up after a while being able to go back to work. But my mother, decided this was sort of, she needed to be there to take care of him. And so she needed to take, to leave work. And then she just decided, well, this is, I guess, the sign I was looking for, the sign that I should, I'm not going to go back and look for another job now. And so that was, her sort of separation from the workforce, which I don't think would have happened right then had the situation been
That's
differently.
that 2 extra years you're talking
Exactly.
about. Which also, by the way, makes a huge difference in your Social Security payment.
That's right.
I mean, every month that you work beyond 62 increases what you're going to see in your Social Security check and your
right.
well-being as you get older.
And so if you have this financial reason to stay in the workforce because you need to be ready to go back to work to continue to get this family leave insurance, payment, then you're more likely you have a tendency of you're tied to the workforce more. And so it affects our workforce shortage. It affects our ability not just for aging workers to stay in the workforce, but also to have caregiving. And so the other thing that we're facing with our aging population is we have a dramatic need for caregivers. And paid caregiving is just, we can't get enough of it, and we don't have enough of it to meet our current or our future needs. And so we need people to be able to stay home and care for their aging parent, care for their spouse. The average 80-year-old 10 years ago had, I think it's on average of 8 living relatives who theoretically could provide care. So, they might not be.
But then what's the opposition, though? What's the ideology that gets in the way of this? We're talking about giving care. We're talking about keeping families more intact. We're talking about getting workers back quicker. Where's the hatred here? Is it just
there is.
It's a liberal idea, so we gotta give pain to the liberals?
I
what
think
is it?
It has been increasingly, as many things, becoming more and more partisan. So last year, a similar bill passed the Republican-controlled legislature 3 times, and so it was a bipartisan bill that passed 3 times. Our current governor, last time around, at the beginning was working with the legislature saying, how do we get this done? And this just, I think he got a lot of pressure. I was seeing a lot of things coming his way at one point saying, why are you doing this? This is an income tax. And now he calls it an income tax. And,
And he calls the benefit of vacation.
And he calls the benefit of vacation.
When you're caring for your dying father, that's
exactly.
a vacation. Have a great time.
Exactly. And so there is, some ideological switch that was flipped. And because, like I said, this is not ideal. This is not a partisan issue when you talk to voters. This is something that across the board people really overwhelmingly support.
We have a big vote on this tomorrow, so we hope we can get it done.
Well, we're getting ready for the break, but when we come back, I think we have a video we might be able to show.
We want to do that, folks, so you want to be here to see our video.
See what I did there? I teased it. I teased it out a little bit. I'm a television professional.
The most dangerous hour on TV, right here. Thanks to Mike Farley. Okay, folks. We hope when we come back, some of you will care to join us at 640-3091. We'll be right back.
This is important stuff. Call in.
Third and final segment with Amanda Sears, Director of the Campaign for a Family-Friendly Economy. We'll be right back. Hello, everybody. This will be our third and therefore, as always, the final segment of this week's edition of the
It's like a
Progress
hockey game,
Report.
3 periods.
3 periods, 20 minutes each.
Yeah, exactly
Just like a hockey game.
Wow.
Yeah. Good. And we are very pleased to have
Just
with
thinking playoffs. I'm sorry, a little distracted in the break.
us. Well, we do have our distractions. We are here with Amanda Sears, director of the campaign for a family-friendly economy, and we've been talking about some of their priorities, and their top priority, apparently, is what we've really been talking about, and that is, can New Hampshire finally get to offering its citizens a family and medical leave, paid family and medical leave act benefit, which would help so many people be in the workforce, to help us meet our workforce needs, help our move the economy forward, not to mention the tremendous benefits to the people who need this.
Treating families humanely. This is going to be
Yeah.
used when people are sick, when your father's dying, when your mother's sick, when your kid, has a long-term illness that you have to take some time off and take care of them. When it's just a matter of being humane with people, and to flippantly call it a vacation and call an insurance contribution that we do with workers' comp. We do it, we do it with unemployment insurance. Everybody, they want that benefit. They don't begrudge the premium. And it's pretty craven to go after it. We were exploring before the break what happened, and during the break we talked about it. I mean, it was the governor. They got to him. The ideologues got to him, and now you need a veto-proof majority.
Yeah. But the governor has a fallback. He says he and the governor of Vermont have come up with a alternative that cannot be called an income tax. And you want to talk about that, and whether that
Sure.
means anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you got to it in the beginning, which was it's basically the status quo. And so it's a voluntary plan, and that's what we have right now is a voluntary plan. If you want to offer this and can find a way to offer it, go ahead.
With no infrastructure to support it.
That's right.
That's
right.
With
Well,
who
let's
do you
make
send the
taxes
check?
voluntary. Why not?
Speed limits. Let's make speed limits.
voluntary.
I think the blood alcohol content should be
Yeah.
voluntary. Let's make everything voluntary, and we'll see how that works.
That's right.
We're
And
being
so-
sarcastic and shouldn't be, probably. This is a serious issue.
Right. And so, so basically what the governor's plan amounts to is that he's saying they would offer it to state employees, and the state would pay for it, for state employees to have this benefit. So the 10,000 state employees. And he says it would be free. Although when they went into contract negotiations, evidently what I saw in the press about that was that they said that, well, it wasn't exactly free. It came with other clawbacks of other benefits. And so, I don't know the ins and outs of that, but that's what I read in the paper myself.
Clawback is
And
never
so-
good, when you.
No, and so anyway, it's theoretically that the idea that the governor has said he has is that it would be that if they sort of an if we build it, they will come mentality. So if we offer and pay for a family medical leave insurance benefit for state workers, and we say that whoever we pick to administer that contract, whichever private insurance company, if we say a part of having that contract is you have to offer this benefit to other employers in New Hampshire, that will make the benefit more available. And then they've also said, and we would develop an individual market where any individual, so if your employer decided that they didn't want to offer this, we would allow for an individual marketplace where individuals could opt in to having this.
Boy, this sounds so familiar.
It does.
It sounds like something they hate.
It does.
This is really weird, Bob.
And so
I don't know. Am I wrong? I mean, this really sounds very familiar.
it does, and it'll start sounding even more familiar because they put out a request for information to insurance companies and had several reply this winter, and to a company they said we would love for you to pay us to offer this to your mandatory pool of employees, the state employees, and we have to think about it, but there's probably a way that we can offer this to
Without
other
a mandate, it doesn't work so good.
Right, and so there's probably a way that we can offer that same thing to companies that have 100% participation. So to companies that are going to pay for this for their employees, we can probably also offer it to them. But to a company, they said many of them were silent on what it would cost for individuals to participate in an individual market just said, we'll offer this to state employees. But the ones that said anything about what that individual market, what a voluntary market could look like, said, we don't know how we would begin to think about pricing such a market. And in order for this to be anything affordable, we would need to do several things. So for instance, and this is where it sounds very familiar, we would need to exclude people with pre-existing conditions. So if you have a child with a disability, so you're more likely to end up in the hospital at some point.
You get into this when you try
this.
to. I do not understand the stranglehold that Hartford, Connecticut has on this country. They put out it's like frosting. They put right on top of everything, and they scoop money off of us. I do not understand that. I mean, I couldn't understand it with the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
I was in favor of a single payer then. I still am, or at least the public option. These Republicans, they must all have stock in the insurance companies.
Well, and their voters don't, because like I said, voters support this. And so,
no, that's
but
right.
in addition to the exclusion of folks with pre-existing conditions, they've also suggested age bans. So that means making it more expensive for certain aged workers. So women of childbearing age and aging workers. So when you get into these kinds of situations where they're already, before they're even offering any kind of a price band for what it might cost, they're saying we need to exclude and we need to make it more expensive. What you're going to end up with, if you end up with anything besides state employees having this benefit, which they would under the other plans as well. So, we're not saying anything about that state employees should have this benefit too. But what you end up with is the status quo. So you end up with the people who are have part-time jobs, low-income workers. Those people are still not going to have access to this benefit. So what the governor is talking about really is just the status quo.
Because they get better premiums from the other folks. They don't care about those people.
Well,
because it's a profit motivated system. A state-run system is motivated to provide
takes the profit out of it.
the policy.
That's right, and that's why
to make a profit.
That's why that is the best way to ensure that everybody in this state who needs this benefit has access to it, and that's why we're saying that the governor's plan simply doesn't work and it's not viable.
You brought a video that shows the governor. Can you set that? I'd like to show that. Set that up a little bit. We've talked about this policy, and now we're going to see kind of his reaction to it. But set up the video clip we're going to see.
Sure. So there are two policies that have been advancing through the legislature. SB 1, Senate Bill 1, is one of those, and it's would allow for everybody in the state to have access to up to 12 weeks of leave at 60% wage replacement. Passed the Senate, it's SB 1, so it was the Senate's top priority bill. Went over to the House, passed the House, and so now it's on its way to the governor's desk. So we put out the word to folks who support this kind of policy and need it, and said, come to the State House. And we want people to hand deliver their story, their reason that they need family and medical leave insurance to the governor's office.
And every one of these people that you put the word out to is I assume, a paid political operative?
No.
They all wore their suits and ties?
No, but that is what will make the video so sad, really.
These were real people, right?
Because these were real people. We had one woman who came who was in a wheelchair because in December she was hit by a car by a person texting and had 3 limbs broken. And she made it out of her house, which is hard right now, in order to be at this rally so that she could hand deliver to the governor's office her need for the governor to sign SB 1, to sign this bill. So there were over 150 people that did this. The governor's office ended up having to, there's one person the governor did not come out. The governor did not talk to folks. But the normal one person that was at the governor's reception desk brought 2 other staff people out to process the line of over 150 people who were giving the governor a pen to sign the bill, said, sign SB 1, and a note card.
And that was kind of a tally of how many people showed up.
That's right, and the governor has all these note cards, and their staff took down all the names and the information from people. So the governor's office knows that there were over 150 people there.
So they just didn't drop pens on his desk. They actually came and told stories.
They came and told stories. And you'll see in the video, at first you'll see the governor talking at a rally a few days later, where he says, I have a funny story. So he mocks the people that came.
Yes, he did.
And he mocks them. And then says, there were 30 paid people that came to my office. And you will see the line of people out his office, down the hall. It goes, you can't see it in the video, but it goes down the stairs to the next floor of the State House. This was over 150 people, and he's saying there were 30 paid Democrats who were there, and it was funny. And it was actually people who were there saying, this is my experience, surviving cancer. This is what it did to my family. This is my experience after my car accident. This is my experience with my child with a disability. These were heartfelt stories. People took time out of their workday on a Tuesday afternoon to come to the governor's office. And that weekend he mocked them. He mocked them, which is really, to me,
let's see the video. Let's see it and see what it really looks like.
So here's another funny story. That same group of young people, not the same group, not exactly the same group, but about a week ago, a group of young people, about 30 of them, most of them paid volunteers of the Democrat Party, all came to my office to give me a pen to sign SB1, the income tax. Now let me tell you, no, here's the funny part. So they bring in all these pens and they quietly put them in a box and quietly go away. Again, half of them were probably paid staff. I don't think there's a lot of passion there.
So you can see for yourself, there were not 30 people there, and yes,
they
were.
Looked like a whole bunch of young, young Democrats.
That's what a lot of folks there were saying. We're like, wow, I'm glad that in the governor's eyes, I am a young paid staffer, because
and no passion at all to with 3 broken limbs, get yourself up to Concord.
Well, and that's, yes, they were orderly. They were respectful of the office. So they lined themselves up and waited and told their story. And so they were passionate and respectful, and they deserve the same kind of respect from our governor, and they did not get that. And it's, to me, it's incredibly disappointing, and it really just reaffirms, he says he's for paid leave, and then he mocks the people who come to his office to say we need it.
And by the way, 2 rounds of applause.
Right.
2 rounds of applause. And I've always said a leader without followers is just a guy taking a walk. Mm-hmm. It's the people who support these people that really have to look themselves in the mirror. And their neighbors have to have discussions with them that they're applauding a man mocking people exercising their right to petition their government.
And standing, and he doesn't call it and he doesn't refer to paid leave at all. He calls it SB1, the income tax bill, and is standing in front of somebody with a big sign that says taxation is theft. And
that's their new line.
That's what the sign said.
Yeah.
And this is a governor who is managing a state, and we have to have honest conversations about how we as a society work and how it functions. And when you're up there with slogans like taxation is theft, I don't know how he can sleep at night when he's managing a state that does administer many taxes and must, in order to have the basic functions of government work.
Well, we run a pretty lean state. It's a skeleton crew up in Concord.
Operates with a structural deficit every term. What's your prognosis?
Well, so I do think the governor's going to veto SB1, and I think that's really unfortunate, and I think he's going to do it within the next couple of weeks.
It's going to be very hard to override that veto, I'm afraid.
It will be hard, because this has become very partisan, and I think that when you have the leader of a party in a state who is speaking like that, it makes it very hard for other members of the legislature to step outside.
A child of privilege who would never, no matter what he needs to do for his own or his family's assistance, it's not going to hurt him a bit.
That's right. And so it's really unfortunate, because this should not be a partisan issue. And I think that there is another vehicle for this besides SB1, which is that it's in the budget. And so the governor put in his plan in the budget. The House Finance Committee took out the program that he put together that would really preserve the status quo, took that out and put in the bill that had passed the House, and that would establish this for everybody, and that's going to be voted on tomorrow.
Yes.
And so, and I think, there's a showdown coming when a lot of issues that people in this state care about, and that the legislature that was elected by the people is advancing. And the governor's just threatening to veto this and so many other things. And so I think that, we have to figure out how we can move forward as a state and get done the work that people elected folks to do. And just threatening to veto everything is not the way to get it done. And that's really going to hamper our ability to get done what people in this state need and count on our leaders to move forward on.
It's amazing. We've gone through quite a bit, but we haven't gone through everything, and we have practically no time left. But I know another priority for the campaign for a family-friendly economy is restoring a New Hampshire minimum wage and having it not be just a default federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. You want to just
we need an elevator pitch.
Okay.
60 seconds or so.
Okay, well, Wages have not kept pace with the rising costs that families face. Our minimum wage is the federal minimum wage. We used to have our own state minimum wage. That was eliminated a few years ago
Yep,
by
from
the
O'Brien
legislature.
legislature.
And so there are bills advancing right now in the New Hampshire legislature to put back in a New Hampshire minimum wage so that we take control and say, what should the floor be in our state based upon our cost of living and our businesses, and don't cede that right to control that to the federal
And there's
government.
a tie to CPI or something like that, is there not? These would escalate
In some
without
of them,
legislative
in some
action.
of them there is, and so in each, I think there's 3 or 4 different bills that are, maybe there's 2 now that have been condensed, but they would step up the minimum wage. They would reinstitute a New Hampshire minimum wage, step it up so that it moves up gradually, so that it's not just an immediate jump, that businesses couldn't handle. And then some of them, I do believe, look at indexing it to the rising costs.
Just
over
a few
time.
seconds left, but tell people that might want to help out what they should do to help out
Sure.
by joining the campaign or otherwise.
Yes, you can find our Facebook page, the Campaign for a Family-Friendly Economy, online, and there are actions you could take there. For instance, right now, just writing letters to the editor or contacting the governor, retweeting that video from our Facebook page and saying, is this really the kind of leadership that we need to address important issues? And so I think, taking action, you can find ways to do that on our website or on our Facebook page.
Terrific. Well, so glad you could make it down here.
Thank
'cause
you.
I guess
Me
it's
too.
not easy for you with Wednesday being Cub Scouts and all that, but
Well,
we're certainly glad you
From
did.
our end, it was
And
worth
we
the
would-
trip.
Me too.
we
For
would
took
love
me
a
to
lot
have
too.
you
away
come
from
back,
this.
and
I would love to.
I would hope Amy could join you sometime and tell her story, which I thought was very compelling. And I just wanted to say, folks, that next week Mike and I will be back. We're going to be back with Bill Ryder, the head of the Manchester Community Mental Health Center, to talk about, that's another huge issue that involves the budget, the whole issue of the warehousing of people with
Quality of life for
psychiatric,
families affected
psychiatric
and the
crisis
rest
in
of
our
us as well.
emergency rooms, which is a terrible thing. And there's good people like Amanda working on these issues. Bill Ryder's another one. So we'll be looking to greet him, and we hope you'll join us again next week for another edition of the Progress Report. And thank you, and enjoy this 10th of April, and it's going to warm up on the weekend.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.